Hey guys, it's Danny. Welcome back to Next Level Coding. And in this video, I'm going to teach you guys everything you need to know as a beginner about one of Python's most fundamental concepts, and that is the Python function. Now in this video, we're going to talk about how to properly declare functions to be able to be consistent with the Python syntax, how to cover concepts such as return statements, as well as do a bit more of advanced function development and adding things like docstrings, as well as specifying the data types of the input and outputs of your function. If you truly want to begin to understand the Python programming language, learning how to be able to create functions is a fantastic place to start. If you guys find this video helpful, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. But for now, let's get right into it. In order to create a function in the Python programming language, we need to follow the appropriate syntax. Syntax just being a big fancy word for the sort of quote unquote rules a programming language demands you follow when writing code. And specifically, in order to create a Python function, we always lead with the keywords D, E, F. Now, when I was first learning the Python programming language, I often associated the D, E, F keyword just with the simple word define. Like right here, I'm about to define a function. So the first step, whenever you want to create a function in Python, you're going to want to begin with this D, E, F keyword. And then the next thing we supply within the same line of the D, E, F keyword is the name of our function. And just to keep things super simple, I'm going to go ahead and name my function square number. Now you'll notice that I actually separated both words here with an underscore. If I didn't do that and I go ahead and provide a space, you'll notice my IDE underlines this in red, throwing an error because these two words are disjointed. So if you're defining a function with multiple words, you would definitely want to separate them with an underscore character. Now in the industry, we actually call this representation of characters, or rather this concatenation of words, snake case. And what we mean by that is when you define your function, you typically never want to capitalize any letters, right? When you define Python classes, that's a bit different. But in the context of function declaration, it is the industry standard to keep everything lowercase separated by an underscore. Next, we go ahead and supply an open and closed set of parentheses should we choose to provide any arguments to our function. And the last thing we need to do in this line is add a colon character. Now, syntactically, this is the end of the function declaration line, and anything that we would like our function to do, we go ahead and place underneath it. Now, you'll notice if you're working in an IDE like PyCharm or even Visual Studio Code, when you go ahead and press enter, you'll notice that you actually indent over slightly one tab from the leftmost section of your IDE. And this is essentially telling the Python interpreter, hey, everything that is indented after our keyword DEF and the function name is going to be within the scope of the function. And so as the name suggests, we will go ahead and square just a random number by printing it out. And so let's just go ahead, and for the sake of simplicity, let's go ahead and just supply this with 3 times 2. If I want to call a function, I could go ahead and come outside the local scope and then come down to the global scope of my program. If I were to go ahead and just simply write out square number and run my script, you'll actually notice that within my terminal, I get the number 9 printed out as we might expect. Okay, great. So we know how to define a Python function, but what if we actually would like to assign the output of a function to a variable? Well, in order to do that, we're going to have to use another keyword in the Python programming language called the return statement. Now, for example, if I were to go ahead and assign this to a variable called squared number, and I set that equal to the output of my function, if I were to go ahead and actually try to print out this squared number variable, you'll notice that something very interesting happens. I get a none to be printed out, and that's simply because the default return type for a function is going to be actually the none data type. So to explicitly specify what I would like to return, no surprise here, I actually use the return keyword statement within the Python syntax. And just to go ahead and sort of modify this slightly, let's go ahead and create a variable here called number and simply assign the value of 3 times 2 to that and return the number here. Well, now if we were to go ahead and run my function, you'll notice that indeed we get the number 9 and no none type return because we explicitly specified what we want to return from our function with the return keyword. Now let's say we want to be a bit more dynamic with this function. Well, I could actually come within this open and closed set of parentheses that we created before and specify input arguments. And so for example, if I were to go ahead and put num1 here and I were to go ahead and supply another variable right here called power, well, instead of just simply specifying a 3 and a 2 and returning that every single time in perpetuity, I could actually replace the 2 with a power and the base with the num input, like so. And so now if I were to go ahead and run my function, you'll notice that, I get an error here, right? If we look at it, I have a type error. The squared number function is missing 2 required positional arguments, right? Because I forgot, not really, to supply them as an argument to my square number function below right here. So to get the same result we had last time, I will go ahead and simply place a 3 for the num1 variable and then the 2 for the power variable. And you'll notice that actually my IDE is smart enough to see that indeed I assign the 3 in the first spot, which corresponds to the num1 variable, and the 2 to the power spot, which corresponds to the second variable. If I were to go ahead and run my file now, you'll notice indeed we get the same result as 9 as we've been getting before. If you guys want to explicitly state the sort of argument names, that's totally fine. In fact, I would actually highly recommend that so there is no confusion. And so if you were to go ahead and simply assign 3 to the num1 variable as well as the number 2 to the power variable, you notice that our IDE actually highlights these in red because they represent arguments to our function. And just to confirm things, if I were to go ahead and run this again, we would actually get the number 9 to be printed out one more time. Now, I hope you guys are finding this video very useful so far, but we are just beginning to scratch the surface of everything you need to know to really understand the Python programming language. And if this video has piqued your interest, or if you've ever thought about learning the Python programming language, might I recommend to you my online course called Software Engineering in Python. And I created this course because as a self-taught programmer who had no idea how to code when he was in college to learning on his own and now securing a job as a back-end Python developer at a fintech startup, I know the shortcomings of all the traditional bootcamp and MOOCs like Coursera and other resources out there. And I tried to construct a curriculum that I would have enjoyed and would have found to be very useful going through it back when I was learning how to code for the first time in the Python programming language. Now, the first module in the course does a lot of what we're doing now, where we start with the very basics of the syntax in the Python programming language and sort of quote unquote level up to the point where we're actually doing some pretty advanced stuff like unit testing functions or class methods, even learning how to mock their outputs to be able to pass certain use cases. The course only costs $50. It's 100% money back guarantee. You get lifetime access to any current and future modules that I'm going to be releasing. And the trade-off here is really you could learn and acquire a skill set that has the potential to change your life like it did mine. Again, I'll link the course down in the description below, but for now, let's get back right to the video. Now, the last topic we'll cover in this video to really make you guys feel like you're professional developers is this concept of labeling your arguments with data types for the inputs, as well as labeling the data type for the output of your function. Now, in order to do this, let's keep working with our square number function here. Let's say I wanted to specify to any developer that might come behind me within our code base that the arguments for this function need to be integers. Well, to specify that, what I could do is simply follow the argument with a colon character, similar to the colon character you use for a dictionary, for example, and I can actually specify the data type here. And in this case, I will specify the data type to be int or int. Similarly, for the power variable, just because I would like to keep everything as an integer, I can go ahead and again supply this as a data type of int. And so now anyone who comes in after me looking at this function will notice that, hey, these are going to have to be integers in order for this function to work properly. Now, another cool thing is you can actually specify the data type or expected return data type of the output of your function by using what I like to call the arrow sort of representation, right? We just go ahead and supply the minus sign and the whatever this is, less sign or greater than sign, creating the symbol of an arrow. And I can actually go ahead and supply the data type I wish to or expect to return from my function on the right-hand side. And so just to recap, to specify the output of our function, we have the function declaration on the left, supply this arrow symbol, and then supply the data type we wish to return on the right-hand side. And lastly, if that wasn't enough to really get a good standing within other developers who you might be working with one day, it's so important, in my opinion, to create what we call docstrings within functions. And what docstrings are simple summaries of what a function does, along with specifying, hey, what exactly are these arguments that we are supplying beyond just the data type that we wish them to be. And so in order to create a docstring within a Python function, we just go ahead and simply supply a set of triple quotes left and right, and go ahead and press our enter key here and bracket the doc string with the set of triple quotes. And you'll notice my IDE is actually smart enough to sort of define everything already. And so typically what we do is on the first line here, in particular in this line number 4, I'll go ahead and write down what this function should do. And so I could write something just very simple, very concise, and say function raises a number to a power. And again, I can continue to use this doc string to go ahead and specify what exactly each variable is right beyond just the data type. For this num1, I can say base we are raising to a power, and for the power I could just go ahead and specify that this is the number we are raising the base to. And lastly, we can specify the expected return type, which again we've specified up here. And so typically what I could just write here is just Python int. Again, we expect an int to be returned for this function. Now, even though we run our function right now and get the same output, you'll notice just how much more professional this looks, right? We have the specified input data types, we have the specified output data types, as well as the doc string describing what exactly the function does and sort of telling a more contextual story for what the inputs represent when we pass them in to our function. But that's gonna do it for this function introduction video. Try saying that 3 times fast. I hope you guys really enjoyed it and hope you guys found this to be extremely useful in developing your understanding of what exactly Python functions are, and hopefully you can create some for your own. Please make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. I've got a bunch more videos queued up and teed up for you all. And again, if you guys are truly a beginner, I highly recommend check out my online course that I created down in the description below for those of you who want to really understand how to learn the Python programming language. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later.